Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to this event. My name is Amy Summers. First, I just want to introduce our esteemed guests that we have here today that are really doing a lot in the fertility industry. And I'm going to have them introduce a little bit about themselves first, but first to my left.
Thanks so much for having me here today. It's wonderful to be here, part of this really important conversation that we're going to be having. I am a scientist by training. I am the founder and CEO of UVA. We are a women's health company that has an at-home test to monitor multiple hormones through urine, track that data over time, and learn what every woman's unique hormone profile is. While we're starting with fertility, really we believe that all the various phases of a woman's life are dictated by various imbalances and patterns in these hormone levels. So if we can understand that, we can actually guide you through all those various phases. Why did I start this company? I went through infertility myself, and it really opened up my eyes to, no offense, but how broken our healthcare system is. Predominantly, women just aren't given the data or information they need to truly advocate for their own health, and I wanted to change that. So my solution was to provide women with that active data so they can go to their doctor and have a two-way conversation.
So while we're talking about urine, did anyone go to the bathroom here, by the way? The disco ball is amazing. And if you haven't peed yet, save your pee, because Amy will tell you what to do with it. But I will tell you the bathroom is amazing with the disco ball. So, okay. My name is Dr. Brian Levine. I am a practicing reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist, which is code word for fertility doctor. And I love what I do. I actually help people get pregnant, stay pregnant. I help people complete their families, protect their fertility, freeze their eggs, and everything in between. However, in 2021, surrogacy became legalized in New York State, and very quickly, I learned as a doctor that it actually was a really unfair system. It's price prohibitive, time prohibitive, and incredibly emotionally expensive, or actually just inaccessible for most. So I started a company called Nodal, which is hopefully your first stop when you go into third-party reproduction, which is donor egg, donor sperm, or surrogacy. And our first thing that we have done is we've tried to make surrogacy more affordable and more accessible for people by allowing to build a two-sided marketplace. And we're colloquially known as the Bumble of surrogacy, which is a very cool thing. But I'm super psyched to be here tonight. I really hope you guys start to understand a little bit more about all your friends who are trying to get pregnant or stay pregnant or may have different paths to parenthood than the traditional path. So thank you for being here, and please make sure you use the bathroom. It is cool.
Well, thank you. First, I just have to say, looking around, this is a dream to have an event like this, and I'm just so appreciative and grateful to be sitting next to such brilliant minds talking about a topic that has been the focus of my career for the past 20 years, which is supporting fertility through holistic methods, diet, and lifestyle. So I'm Ayla Barmer. My conventional training and background is as a registered dietitian. I'm a functional medicine integrative practitioner as well. I spent most of my career in clinical practice, building my private practice, working with couples who are struggling to conceive, who were either in tandem working with a fertility clinic, more conventional methods, or wanting to avoid that or not seeing success, through their fertility treatments, which is a very financially, emotionally, and a stressful process. And so really Fullwell was born out of a need that I saw in my practice. And that was one, I was creating laundry list supplement protocols for already stressed, couples, and that didn't feel good for anybody. And so I really wanted to create a comprehensive, really evidence-based therapeutic formula that I could use with my practice patients and I knew would be effective. Second, really I was driven by the lack of transparency in the industry. I really felt that was gate walls, and I really wanted to get behind the curtains and understand how do we know, what is on the label is actually what you're getting per serving? How do we know this is safe? There was research at the time I started sketching out my formula on my notebooks that there was contaminants, real contamination issues with heavy metals and things like prenatal vitamins. And so I just, I wanted to not only do the testing that I thought was absolutely critical on the products that we're consuming in this stage of life, really any stage of life, right? But to make sure we shared that, that we're empowering individuals with the data, the information about what they're taking. We always share our test results, and we take education really seriously at Fullwell, so the context in which you also you take the supplements too. So just really proud of what we've done over the past 4 years, and grateful to be having this discussion and that we've got an audience who wants to listen.
What was not out there that you recognize that kind of forced you into doing a supplement company? And can I go on Amazon and say, I just want the evidence-based supplements? Does that come up as a search column? Or how do we find this? And then for the healthcare practitioners in the room, how do they integrate that into what they're doing? And when do they integrate supplements versus eat healthy?
Yes, so let me see if I can answer all that and be concise. So first, I really, the concept of therapeutic amounts, evidence-based doses, and bioavailable forms of nutrients is really important. I know I kind of threw out a bunch of words there, but we want to be sure that we're not taking supplements that have what I call kind of pixie dusting in them, which is really kind of a sprinkling of ingredients to have it show up on the label, but, is it really enough to do what we want it to do, and I don't think the average person, has the time to be the subject matter expert. We're really relying on these products and the recommendations of our health practitioners, right? And so the thing that I really found concerning, and I suspected when I got in this industry, is that there's very few subject matter experts behind the formulas on the markets. They may consult, but it's a little different than having a subject matter expert in nutrition, like registered dietitians, who really are following the quality of the product all along the way, beyond even just the formulation. So, that piece is really important. I mean, and to give you a couple of examples, right? Choline is a nutrient that 95% of women aren't even getting the bare minimum of the adequate intake level. And we have newer research that shows that level should actually be double that. A lot of supplements will put maybe 20, 50 milligrams of choline in their supplement, and to really drive home the point of how important that is, it plays a role in neural tube development, in brain health. It's a critical nutrient that we aren't getting enough of, and we do need supplementally. And, it may wind up on your label, but is it enough to really help with critical baby's brain development, right? So that's one example. I mean, forms of nutrients are confusing. I mean, folic acid versus folate. Methylfolate is what we see as the majority of folate in our food supply, and yet folic acid is less easily tolerated and bioavailable, and that's what we see in formulas. And so there's a lot of issues like that, and really, again, I think the elephant in the room is that we need subject matter experts behind these formulas to ensure, that they're going to be effective. And that's one of the biggest points. But I think scrutiny with the company that you're buying from with dietary supplements is really important. What is their integrity, their quality control, and are they sharing those results? I mean, that's really the biggest thing, right? Like, make sure you've got those results in hand.
You touched on surrogacy a little bit, but I would love for you to kind of expand for our audience. Who is the couple that needs surrogacy? Who's in the most need? Who's not being served? What does that couple look like? How does your company create that emotional support and communication that you touched on just a bit there, so that everybody involved in the surrogacy process is being served?
So let's engage the audience a little bit. Raise your hand if you know someone who's had a baby through surrogacy. It's Brooklyn. I thought we would have saw more. Okay, raise your hand if you've seen in the news some celebrity that's had a kid via surrogacy. Somehow we got 100%. Who thinks that surrogacy is only for the rich and famous and those who are too posh to push? Okay, so one person in the back. So. I'll take it because I need engagement to feed me the energy. It's the end of the day. It's Wednesday. Okay, so here's the deal. So surrogacy is not for everyone, but it could be for everybody. And the answer is, and I will course correct you, it's not just for a couple. It's for a person. It's for a single father by choice, or a gay male couple, or a woman who's had the devastating diagnosis of cancer where she can't be pregnant, or an independent, incredible warrior of a woman who has an unbelievable career who doesn't want to be pregnant because she doesn't want to stop her earning potential for her future family. Or it's the woman who's had so many embryos put in there that she doesn't have enough fingers to count all the embryos that she's gone through. Or the person who can't stay pregnant. Or the person like Kim Kardashian, who everyone assumes was too posh to push, but in reality couldn't be pregnant ever again because she would have died if she got pregnant again because of her history of placenta accreta. So surrogacy is actually a mode of reproduction and people starting and growing and completing their families for people where the bioavailability of a uterus is just not present. Now what's crazy is that in a country of 330 million, and if you split that number in half, so let's just say 150 million are women, let's split that number in half again and say half of those are reproductively aged, you're like, oh my God, he's got an unbelievable audience of 75 million people to reach out to become surrogates. And then when I share with you that there's about 5,000 successful journeys a year in surrogacy in America, you realize that's actually a very small part of what I do for a living as a fertility doctor. And the people that are looking to use a surrogate are the people who dreamed about having a kid or growing their family or giving their kid a sibling. And so the answer is, who's the customer? The customer, the client, the patient, the person is my neighbor, my friend, my family member, and everyone else that we all know in between that shares the common dream that I have with two little girls at home. Now, what do we do that's a little bit different? So to answer your question about that, it's called community. It's why we're here tonight. It's because we talk about it and we're loud and we're proud and we're open and we talk about people understanding how to break down the norms, to understand that surrogacy doesn't have to go to the highest bidder, that the woman doing the heavy lifting, the surrogate herself, should be the most highly compensated individual, not the agency or the broker, because I don't know about you guys, but the last time I bought an apartment, I didn't give my broker 100% bonus, but that's the way it currently works today in surrogacy, where if it costs $150,000, the surrogate tends to only get around 50, and the house or the agency gets around 100. So what we do is we have an unbelievable agency in the sense of we're empowering people to make the right decisions. We have community, but more importantly is we have conversations and dialogues.
So, Amy, I want to get into your hormone at-home testing a little bit more. Can you share with us how hormones can really empower the fertility journey for both healthcare practitioners and those who are trying to conceive?
I mean, it drives everything, right? Like, so when you're trying to get pregnant, you're most likely you're using those ovulation sticks that are looking at specific hormones and trying to detect a pattern to tell you when to have intercourse. You can even go as far as a pregnancy test. A pregnancy test is detecting a hormone in your urine, and it's giving you some signal that you are or you are not pregnant. So these hormones are critical for understanding just the basis of what is going on in our bodies. Right now, UVA measures luteinizing hormone and progesterone. We're adding estrogen in the span of a couple of weeks. And really what we're able to tell you is, one, are you ovulating? When is your most fertile window? So when should you time intercourse? And then even more importantly, did you actually release an egg this cycle or not? And that's a really important question to answer when you're trying to get pregnant. Am I not getting pregnant month after month because I'm missing my fertile window? Or is it because I'm not ovulating? And when you go to somebody like Dr. Levine or Brian here, that's an important piece of information to go to them with, saying, I'm not ovulating. And now you can actually advocate that maybe IUI is not the right solution for you. So you bypass that timeline. That's just one use case. Another one that we commonly see on our side is that if your progesterone is not following certain patterns or predicted patterns, where it's dropping after ovulation and not staying stable and elevated, it's called a luteal phase defect if your progesterone keeps hopping up and down. We've been able to detect that on our tests and actually take intervention to take a pregnancy through at least the first trimester. I'm not going to speak to whether it went to term or not, but at least we were able to save that pregnancy. So I think there's just a lot of misconception about why we want to monitor these hormones. It's not just to inundate you with data, it's to give you that control over your journey so you can make the right decision for yourself.
But how are you how's your company educating healthcare practitioners about this type of testing, and what is outdated about the other type of testing, and how are you educating people about that?
Sure. So my team laughs at me all the time because whenever I pitch UVA, I'm like, my biggest goal in life is to retire that blinking smiley face, right? Like, that should not be the standard for women's healthcare. We should be able to go to a doctor or have a number in our hands. So when we talk about a quantitative test, what you're doing is peeing on a stick, scanning it with your phone, and you get your hormone results within seconds in our app. And you're giving you your actual hormone levels for the ones that we measure. Now, what we also do is, because we're quantitative and we've gone through so much rigor to ensure it's sensitive and accurate, we actually can seamlessly share that data with your clinician if they're one of our partners. So you as the patient control that data, you select your clinician, and then you can opt into sharing that data with your provider, they can see that data in real time on their HIPAA-compliant dashboard that we have. So doctors know how to read hormone levels. I'm not going to school Brian on what to do with that data. He knows what to do with it. But the beauty is that now you also know what they're looking at and what you can ask and what you can do with it.
So by the way, I'm not advocating that you have to buy UVA, but you should. With our egg freezing patients, we see patients all the time who are like, after getting off birth control, I don't want to get back on after freezing my eggs. So you can use a test like UVA as your own form of knowing upside down when you're going to be in your fertile window so you don't get pregnant. Right? So an ovulation predictor kit can actually help you understand contraception, can actually help you understand when not to get pregnant. So it's empowerment for not just people trying to get pregnant, it's empowerment for people understanding their reproductive potential and their journey along the way.
That's why I say that UVA is not an ovulation predictor kit. It's really a test to monitor your hormones, and you do with that data as you want. And I think that's the beauty of being a quantitative test. If you're threshold-based, you're kind of stuck to whatever use case you've defined that test for. But when you're quantitative, you can interpret that data however you want. And I would say that's off-label use, Brian.
But you still should get it.
Brian, you were involved in a Good Morning America piece recently that I watched about a couple that really got into a fiasco with a surrogacy, an international surrogacy. They were trying to get their baby from Mexico, and they ran into a problem. And you stepped in and leveraged your contacts, lucky for them. But, I'm sure that's a nightmare. And, they had said in that story that they did it because it was less expensive to go, out of the country. How are you educating people on this when it comes to surrogacy, about safety, and how can healthcare practitioners help in this education process when maybe someone's considering it?
So despite going to medical school for 4 years, residency for 4 years, fellowship for 3 years, and now practicing for 10, I can tell you that I've met very few fertility doctors who understand the legality of surrogacy in the United States. So first and foremost, New York State legalizing surrogacy in 2021, people look at me and they're like, you're nuts. Like, it's been here forever. And I'm like, actually, it hasn't been. It went to the Supreme Court. It's called Baby M. If you want to have a good cry, go find this movie. It's on Lifetime. Like, you will need a tissue box. But Baby M, which is the story of a traditional surrogacy, which meant the woman's egg and her uterus, was the story in 1984 that ultimately led to the Supreme Court case, which ultimately led to surrogacy becoming illegal in New York State. Now, a woman who became a surrogate wouldn't go to jail. It just meant that the contracts were not valid, so there were no protections for the intended parents. Those are the people looking to actually have the child. So the problem is that because it's a supply-constrained industry, right, there's not a lot of women who are surrogates today, there's a lot of demand, and the demand has outpaced the supply. And before this crazy war occurred in Ukraine, the Ukraine was the capital of surrogacy worldwide. But because of the war in Ukraine, surrogacy in Europe has now gone away. Sometimes it's a little bit in Georgia, but people are now looking, Georgia the country, not the state, but people are now looking for alternatives. So Mexico has always felt like our neighbors to the south, so you might as well do it. Well, it ends up that I was actually on call on July 4th weekend, like playing doctor, and I was like bored in between cases. And so, of course, I'm looking at my Google alerts, and there was a Google alert for the Washington Post about this family from New Jersey who had decided to go through surrogacy in Mexico, and the father was stuck with the kid there. And the baby was born in mid-April, and this was July 4th weekend, and they still were hoping to bring the kid home, and they had no idea of when they were going to bring the kid home. So I tried to find the couple on Instagram and Facebook. I couldn't find them. I actually found the guy on LinkedIn because he had lost his job, and it said that he was looking for a job on LinkedIn, so I just messaged him. I'm like, hi, I'm a fertility doctor in Midtown Manhattan. I have a surrogacy startup on the side with a whole bunch of contacts. If you want a friend, I'm happy just to be a friend and to listen and to help you have contacts. Feel free to message me. And literally the guy wrote me back in 10 minutes. Before I know it, he and I are on the phone together. Before I know it, I say, do you know what, your story's amazing. Can you tell it to me in a WhatsApp? Next thing I know, I'm like texting a whole bunch of patients of mine and friends of mine and lawyers that I know. And within about a half hour, 30, I'd say even maybe an hour, I had a whole chat going of a whole bunch of lawyers and people who are like, you need to call this person, he needs to call this person, we need to do this. So that was on July 3rd. On July 5th, they got the passport, and July 6th, they came home. The crazy part of the story is that for every one of those little baby Simons that's there's probably another 100 American families who can't get out, who didn't have access to the media, who didn't have their local newspaper write a story that then went to the Washington Post. And so the reason that Good Morning America picked up on the story 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago and made it their cover story of that Monday was to hopefully let people understand it's a cautionary tale with a happy ending. This is one of the cases where it worked. People go to Canada to do surrogacy, and then they realize that they can't bring the kid across the border. They go to Mexico, and then they realize they can't bring the kid across the border. So if you're considering surrogacy, understand you can do it in this country safely because there's protections that are county by county and state by state. But more importantly is we have rigor and structure in this country. And so I hope people just understand that. It's a process that's meant to protect the intended parents and the surrogate herself.
Ayla, there's so many fertility options along the way. Can you speak to when the conversation about nutrition and dietary supplements should come into play with healthcare providers? When should that be suggested? Should it be suggested before you try this option or that option, or what have you found has been effective?
Yes, and I have to say, I hope the audience is picking up on it too. I love where the fertility industry in general has gone and where we are now. I think it's a lot of progress around empowering individuals and not just women. I did want to make the point that we view infertility as a women's health issue, and it's not. It is equally shared issue between women and men, and so that's really important. But I love the tools that we have now, and that's really what we're about with Fullwell too, with the transparency in testing and the quality products and sharing information, not gatekeeping anything, and really empowering individuals. And I'd really love to see that happening preconception. I think we're missing key windows to intervene, which really is the preconception period. And I think probably very similar to Brian, in practice, what I have seen are, someone will come to me, usually 99% of the time it's just a woman without their male partner if they have one, and they have been struggling to conceive for a while. They wanted a baby yesterday, and so ideally speaking, I'm seeing someone 3-6+ months prior because it's that window that we have the most opportunity. But with epigenetics, what we do, both men and women in that time frame, influences not just getting to a positive pregnancy test, because that's one goal, that's a big goal, but we put so much emphasis on that, and it really is about having a healthy family, right? So a healthy pregnancy, what we do in the preconception period really affects the health of the pregnancy. What we know and learn about our body before, and the partnerships we have with our health practitioners really makes a difference so that we can optimize egg and sperm quality, our health before we go into pregnancy, where actually a lot of pregnancy complications happen quite early. And so I really love to see the conversation about fertility be about more than just a positive pregnancy test, and more about more than even having babies. Fertility can be a window into overall health. It can give us a lot of insight about our overall hormone health. It's really a societal issue. Infertility affects more than just families. It's if anybody has seen on the news some of the declining, sperm rates that are happening, our modern environments are making it incredibly difficult. The question as to why that's happening is coming up, and I think it's largely a combination of living in modern environments with stressors that our bodies have to process, and stress, toxins, it's not a given that our body will just be able to deal with it. We need nutrients in order to do that. And so it requires us to put more of an emphasis, and I really think in that preconception period, so that we can potentially avoid pregnancy complications and, again, influence generations of health beyond through epigenetics.
For sure, almost your entire staff is pregnant, so that's one success story. But is there a specific success story that you can share with the audience where Fullwell really made a significant difference for somebody that maybe was trying it before they went IVF or some other option?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be in rough shape and a little stressed in a few months when the whole team is on maternity leave, but that's all right. Actually, I will share a story of a case that really has stuck with me and driven my career in fertility, and really got me into this. And it was before Fullwell, but it absolutely was what partially drove me to start Fullwell. So I've been in private practice. That was most of my career, and I had a woman come who was referred by a local renowned IVF clinic, and she was told to see a dietitian to lose weight before her next retrieval, and she should try to lose as much weight as she could as fast as she could. And at the time, there really weren't any other dietitians that I knew of that were working in fertility. There wasn't the real nutrition connection with fertility was weight in fertility. And it turns out that, I intuitively, once I met with her, took her history, looked at, labs, not only did she not need to lose weight, I just instinctively knew that restriction was not the right move, in this stage of life. It's really about flooding the body with the right stuff, giving your body enough resources so that it can prioritize reproduction. We're biologically designed, right, to really prioritize our own survival. And so part of my the lens I look through for supporting fertility clients is how do we really flood the body with the right stuff to tell our bodies that we've got enough resources to spare. So this woman was absolutely stressed, exhausted, had been through several retrievals already, failed to get quality embryos. We worked together and agreed to take a 3-month pause, which both her and her husband at the time, I think it was a relief, honestly, for them to take that break and step back, work with me on just diet, lifestyle. We put together, again, at the time, I was doing a bit of a laundry list of supplements, which thankfully don't need to do anymore. And she went into the next retrieval and she got 2 healthy eggs. They wound up being successful, embryos. I know we've kept in touch over the years. She was so influential over my career, and she has a baby girl, she has a daughter and a son, now. And, I think it really helped me to see what the potential impact could be, right? And there's no downside. It's not that nutrition and lifestyle is going to be the cure for all fertility cases, right? There's a lot that we still don't know, when it comes to fertility, but there's no downside to supporting it. And in fact, I think it's just absolutely critical that we partner, together, conventional medical, fertility clinics, assisted reproductive technology, right? We partner together and bridge that gap between the more holistic, what's considered more holistic approaches, right? And more conventional, because if we do that, it's a win for everybody. We're talking better pregnancy success rates, right? Healthier pregnancies, healthier future generations. And ultimately, the best preventative medicine that I know of. So I get really excited about talking about the preconception period. And really, it was those early cases that I thank, that were referred from this local IVF clinic with, again, that goal to lose weight that I sort of set aside, and created our own plan. And that really led me to start to focus my career on that and start Fullwell.
Brian, you touched on some of the legal issues and how you got all those lawyers on the WhatsApp chain to ask. I'm curious for Nodal, like if somebody comes to your company, how are you addressing those legal concerns? Do they have to get with you and then also get a lawyer over here? Are you integrating that? How is that coming together?
Great question. So everyone's always like, how do you start? How do we end up with a baby, right? Because that's the widget in the end. It's like, how do you get to baby? And so when you want to do that through surrogacy, you realize that there's going to be some lawyers, there's going to be some doctors, there's going to be a whole lot of waiting around and things like that. And what we've designed with Nodal is we've tried to be very accessible and to also be very even-keeled in our messaging to try to be as transparent and open as possible. But ultimately, Nodal is a function of the team that we have, which is this incredible team of incredible individuals. And one of them is Carly Valero, who is a attorney by training. She was a Queens County prosecutor. She ultimately had 27 embryos transferred into herself that never worked, then went through surrogacy successfully as an intended parent, and then just happened to get pregnant on her own for her second kid to just prove that all the doctors were wrong and her body was right in the end. But what Carly will tell you is that the right way to start is to just start, right? So it always starts with you have to have embryos first, and then you make a phone call and you can call us and we'll help you get on our platform. And if you're lucky to match, as most of our intended parents do within the first 3 months of being on our platform, we then say for your next step, you need to go somewhere. Either go to a traditional agency, go to a small agency, do it through a lawyer for an independent journey. So we give people all the resources to empower them. And it's very bespoke, and this is very labor intensive, but it's also a labor of love for us, no pun intended. Did everyone get the joke, or is it too late in the day? Labor of love, whatever, went over half the group. But the whole idea is that we try to make this as like individualized as possible, because standardization and just telling people like, you do A, then you go to B, and you just check this little box, and here's a lawyer, like on LegalZoom, like that doesn't do it, right? These contracts are county by county. These relationships are individuals. These are humans. Every surrogate is a mother by definition, right? You cannot be a surrogate unless you've actually had a family of your own and had successful deliveries and live in a stable food with stable environment, stable job, and things like that. So the answer is we outsource and we give people resources of how to get there for whatever fits their budget.
Amy, I know that you and yourself are a success story. And I love how you said when we were having a earlier chat this week that you're an accidental entrepreneur. Can you share with everyone just how the idea of UVA came about and your own personal journey and what brought you to come up with this idea?
Yeah, sure. So I am pretty much like other founders where I'm super type A. I plan out every aspect of my life, and like my career, I was in industry. I was in pharma for about 7 years, hit a glass ceiling, and my advisor, who ended up becoming an investor in UVA as well, was like, or my boss at the time, he was like, listen, I want to give you promotion, but you either need to have 10 years of experience or have a PhD. And I was like, well, that's BS. And he's like, go invest in yourself and get a PhD. So I went and I did it, but I'm like, I don't want to be here for 5 years. So we did the PhD in 2.5 years, and at the end, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to have a family. And we knew it wasn't going to be easy because I've had irregular cycles my entire life. But I never expected the 18-month journey that we went on, because you know that your body is not working the way that it should traditionally be in a textbook, but you don't understand why, and you don't know what to tweak, because I was in the best health of my life, I was in the best shape of my life, I was eating and doing everything right, peeing on every stick, taking my temperature every morning, like doing all the things I was supposed to do. And yet month after month I got a negative pregnancy test. And what was even more frustrating was with the ovulation test that I was using, I only got a high 5 times, and I never got a peak. So in 18 months, I only saw somewhat of a positive result 5 times. And I was like, there's no way that in 18 months I'm not ovulating more frequently. So what my breaking point was I was sitting on my bathroom floor, 5 a.m., I'm an early riser, and I saw my reflection in my shower door. I was bawling, crying, because I got another negative pregnancy test, and I had everything laid out on my bathroom floor. All my data, all my apps, all my screenshots, everything. And I was like, this cannot be real life. I was sitting with my dad's magnifying glass trying to find a ghost line on a test. I was like, it was 2016? And I was like, there's no way that this is where technology is today. So I went into my PhD lab, and I was like, there has to be a better way. I'm doing such amazing things in my PhD, and yet I'm not applying any of that to this space or to my own health. And that I kind of ranted to somebody that walked by my desk that morning, that poor guy, and he came back to me an hour later. Mind you, this is the second conversation I've ever had with this person. And an hour later, he came back. He's like, Amy, I think we can build something. And that day, we wrote 5 pillars on the whiteboard, and that's what we've held true to with UVA. And I mean, I think we've actually built something that is going to be a game changer for the entire industry, and most importantly, empower women to take control of their journeys.
And just to follow up on that, so this is going well. What do you, I mean, there's so much in hormone health, right? What do you see next for UVA, and also with genetics really playing into fertility? Is that something that you'll be getting more involved with?
I mean, that's like the perfect intersection for me, right? Like, I love genetic data. What I think is amazing, so like my PhD work was in genetics and genomics. You're used to super sparse data and trying to find these like needles in the haystack with a ton of gaps in the data set. With UVA, what's amazing is it is a dream data set to work with. If you want clean data, you will never find a more diligent user than someone who is trying to get pregnant. So talk about an amazing data set to work with. For us, like, yes, we're starting with fertility, but really my goal, as I said earlier, was to scale across every phase of a woman's life. So actually in October, we're launching our perimenopause test. We're planning to address menopause next. And then the beauty is, because we have these hormones, we can go from first period to last and then beyond really easily. So it's really a matter of like, what does the market want? What does the market need? And then pivot accordingly. And then to your question about how we're incorporating genetics, that's going to be an additional layer that we can always put on top. I mean, give me data, I'll tell you what the magic is in there.
Brian, you touched on this at the very beginning, so I want to just do this last follow-up with you on cost. You were talking about how, the perception of surrogacy and the expense of it. You talked a little bit about how your company is making it more accessible. What is the future for surrogacy that you see? Is it going to be an affordable option?
So I think the future of surrogacy is what we're seeing today with fertility, which is that a happy employee is one that has a family if they want it. And an employer-based benefit program that supports their employees and the families, where your first job might be your last job because you stayed there for 20 years as your kids grew up, is kind of the goal. And so one of the biggest issues I have today with the current state of employer-based benefits, and by the way, if you know of any employer that does, you can call it Google, Facebook, or Meta, and Uber, and Lyft, and McKinsey, and Wachtell Lipton, and Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs, and all these big corporations all have fertility-based benefits. And if these companies have fertility-based benefits, about 8 to 9% of their employees identify as LGBTQ+. And that large swath of employees don't get to access their benefits to the full potential today. Those who need to use surrogacy, those who need to use donor egg, those who need to use donor sperm, typically those fees are not covered. So a company like Google that's amazing that offers 6 IVF cycles is ridiculous because the average gay male couple needs 1. They need an egg donor and 1 cycle of IVF. But the current system today does not allow Google to apply the 5 cycles they never use to offset the cost of surrogacy. So what's my goal and what keeps me up at night and what do? Is I harass insurance companies. And I tell them you're discriminatory, because that's what they are. And I tell them that it's not fair and it's not nice. And what you're doing is great, but it's just a start. And you're getting way too much credit for what you're doing. And really what insurance companies need to do is to think about people and families and goals and aspirations and not dollars and cents and utilization and checking a box that they like, fertility benefit, check. No. I mean, the glass ceiling exists. We know it does. But there's also a huge glass ceiling out there for those LGBTQ+ individuals who dream of a family and can't afford to even start one because the benefits that are provided for them are not usable by them. So what's the future of surrogacy? It's affordability, and affordability on your employer's back. And I think what we all know is that if you have an employee that you've kept for 5 years and they have a kid, you celebrate them when they go out on maternity leave because they come back to you. But if you don't offer them a fertility benefit, you lose them when they go out on maternity leave because they've learned very quickly, very early on, that you don't support them for the entire journey of their family.
And Ayla, last question to you. Like, how does dietary supplements enhance, the fertility journey all the way through? And are there different things that you're using at different times? Are you changing what you're using as you go along? And then you touched on men a little bit, but I'd like you to go a little bit more on that because I think that's one of the things that makes your company so unique is the focus on men. What is the message that we're not getting to men, and what do these healthcare providers need to be, educating the women that are coming in about how do they have that conversation with, their male counterparts?
Yes. So first, what is the case for supplements first? I mean, because I think I've always described myself as a real food RD, and I will always look to food first, when I'm working with anybody. I don't think anybody really wants to take supplements, right? I mean, we want to get everything we need from food, but here's the reality. I touched on it earlier, we are living in modern environments with stressors on our body that require us to consume more nutrients. And you couple that with the fact that our modern food supply is processed. It takes time to travel to us. It is packaged for longevity and year-round use, right? And so we are literally getting less nutrient-dense foods. And that's the reality. We need more now to combat our modern environments, but we are getting less. And that really is the case for supplementation and targeted, smart, safe, effective supplements. I think that the earlier you can start ensuring that your vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant status is good, the better your overall health is going to be. And you'll see it. I mean, I'm already dreaming up a clinical study with Uva where we can show the impact, of quality, replete humans, what that really does to your hormones and really seeing it in how you feel too. And so the earlier you can start focusing on that, whether or not a family is something in your future, the better. And continuing that throughout. I mean, I appreciate where Uva's headed into the perimenopause space. I see that in the future for Fullwell because fertility extends beyond the stage of life where we're starting families and really does extend into the rest of our life too. I mean, we want to feel healthy. Optimal fertility to me means optimal health, robust health, and this again is not just for women. It's for men as well, and I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, Amy did a fantastic job helping me get onto the circuit, really talking about men's fertility, and it was stunning. The blank stares, frankly, that I was when I was trying to spread the message about how important and impactful men's preconception health really is on the health outcomes of the pregnancy. I mean, we can't really say that we're supporting women's health if we don't include men in this conversation, because what they're doing impacts the pregnancy health, pregnancy complications that could and do literally kill women, like preeclampsia, preterm birth. Some of these things are traced back to health of men and their sperm, and while that may not be the sole issue, it is that important. And so I really am on a mission, and I think that men can take it, right? Like, we always are a little, I think, reticent to talk about sperm. And my poor dad will say, if I say sperm one more time in an interview on TV, he's gonna just, I don't know, he's gonna keel over. But I'm gonna keep doing it. So it's just absolutely critical. And I, in my practice, got to the point pretty quickly where I wouldn't see, if there was a male partner, and it wasn't an option to not engage with me. They had to be involved in the process in making the changes, and I really tried to make it a fun process too, and such a stressful, fertility journeys, it's never the way that you expect, to start your family, right? When you struggle like that, it's not the dream. It can become very disempowering really quickly, and I love how empowering, diet and lifestyle can really be for couples, and the things that they can do together. I love planning like date night fertility charcuterie boards, for couples and things like that. It can be fun. It doesn't have to be so sterile and clinical. But those small things, they make a huge, huge impact.
All right, so it's your turn. Anyone have any questions for our esteemed panel up here?
I have my questions for Amy. I think particularly with maternal health technology, especially since Dobbs, I think people have been really, really concerned about their data and just I think a little inundated almost with the amount of apps coming out right now. I mean, I think personally being in this space, I'm like, which one's the good one? And so I guess what are specific things people should be looking for when engaging with maternity related apps, and I guess what are things they should know going in, in terms of privacy and those kinds of things?
There's a lot. I mean, I think Dobbs, as unfortunate as it was, a slight silver lining that came out is it kind of put all these companies on check, right? I remember that day so well. It was a Friday that the ruling got overturned, and then if you remember that weekend, pretty much every app and fertility company had some sort of a message saying, we are working to ensure your data is secure. Uva was completely silent during that entire mess because our data has always been secure. We have been HIPAA compliant from day one. Everything's been encrypted. Everything is secure. We have a BAA with Google. It's all very secure. So for the fact that, it's really sad because I had to delete all 2 years worth of data that I had collected because it wasn't secure there. So on Uva's side, we don't track whether you've conceived or not. We can detect that in our data, but we don't store that in our database at all. For a consumer who is thinking of using an app, read the terms and conditions really carefully. Make sure there's an option for you to actually de-identify or delete your account on any of these platforms. That, I think, has now become kind of a mandated thing from Apple, if you want to have an app online that's going to detect any health data, but people can fly by. So definitely check for those things.
Hi, my name is Crystal. I'm a registered dietitian, and I work in the dietary supplement space, more on the manufacturing and research and development side. And as Amy mentioned earlier, the dietary supplement space is pretty muddy. How do you know which ones are good ones and which companies are good companies? Are there so sometimes I see countries doing things really, really well. The regulatory system is on point, everything's kind of vetted before it even hits the market. Are there countries that are doing really amazing things in the fertility space, and what can we learn from them? Is there stuff out there that really inspires you?
Yeah, so I love where your question's going because it's really easy to say zero, because there's no country that does it right. So if you take a look at Canada and our neighbors to the north, fertility coverage is provincial. So depending on where you live and which province you're in, there could be some great outcomes where you'll get supplements for free and diagnostic workups for free, or you might wait a year to figure out if you have fallopian tubes that are open and connect to one uterus. There are countries like Israel that are amazing where IVF is free as long as you have up to 4 kids and you're under the age of 44. You can do as many IVF cycles as you want for free. There are countries out there that are like Australia where they have some government subsidies that make fertility access a little bit more accessible. But it's funny that they say they make access accessible because they still have to pay something. And then there are countries like ours where fertility now has become consumerism, and where you sometimes go to the brightest, yellowest sign that you see, or you go to the place that's accessible. But by the way, there's only 700 fertility doctors in this country that actually practice what I do every day. And so there's a huge shortage in the labor force. And we have the most fertility doctors in the world in this country. And so what happens is that what country does it right? I think we do it the best because we have really good guidelines. We have the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. We have the American Urological Association. We have the American College of OBGYN. So we have great recommendations and guidelines on what to do. But just out of curiosity, to again just poll the audience, who read the Washington Post article 2 weeks ago about DHEA supplementation? A bunch of people. So I'll give you the cliff notes. Or it's like Larissa from our team over there would say like TLDR, like too long didn't read. That's what these Gen Zers say, by the way. So I was born in 79, whatever. So it ends up that there's this fertility doctor in Upper East Side that wrote a book. It begins with an egg, yada, yada. And in that book, he talks about the amazing success of supplementation with DHEA, which is effectively a testosterone derivative, or when metabolized, will ultimately produce higher levels of testosterone in the body. Now you're like, wait a second. Why the hell does a woman want to bolster her testosterone levels? Well, there is some research out there, some really cool research out there that shows that if you can increase your DHEA levels, which is typically produced by your adrenal glands, but in a sulfated form, you can actually help improve egg quality, at least they thought so, by doing this. And the idea was that you actually shut down the system from the brain down to the ovary, and you give the ovaries a little bit of a rest or a relaxation, because now the brain's not yelling to the ovary, make an egg, make an egg. It's like, hey, make an egg. It's kind of like when your mother asked you to clean up your room, and like when you didn't do it, she just kept raising her voice and yelling more and more. Well, the voice going up is FSH, which is a hormone that I'm sure Amy will do next year, which is how you'll probably predict menopause and everything else. I don't want to give the whole story away, but whatever. But it ends up DHEA was this like wonder drug, everyone thought, and this guy had this clinic where like every patient had to use his formulation, and they could get a discount if they bought it from him, but he actually had a 10x markup in his office. And then of course a Washington Post reporter actually was like, I paid a lot of money for this stuff, and there's now a black box warning from the FDA not to take it, and there's a cease and desist from the FDA to tell this guy to stop peddling this. And there are cautionary tales that actually taking too much testosterone can cause hormone-receptive breast cancers because we actually don't have enough data to support it. So that happened here in America. Great oversight, but we don't have oversight of supplementation. We don't have oversight from the FDA. We don't treat food and supplements like drugs. And so there's less oversight, there's less guidance. But I will say, to answer your question, what country does it best? It's us every day. And who does it best? It's the partners that I have in my clinic.
DHEA was a really good example to bring up, and I just wanted to drive home the point too that I know that there's been some studies in looking at the gross variations in how much DHEA is actually in what you take. So what's on the label versus what's actually in it. So this is, again, where testing is so important. I guess I'm really hard driving that home, but that's a hormone that could potentially have a really negative impact, right? And we need to know that it's a precise amount. We're getting exactly what we expect to get, because there's been huge variations they've found in that particular ingredient and supplement, and that's scary, the prospect of what it can do.
Who here has heard about acai as the up-and-coming fertility supplement? You've heard it. Anyone else? So acai, A-C-A-I, like those really yummy blue bowls that you buy where they load it in with sugar and peanut butter, yeah, that's not going to do anything for you, but they're just delicious. But it has been found that acai is probably the future that we're going to be talking about of a supplement where if there's a pure supplementation to be done of a single agent, like a monosubstance, was purified acai. And the reason that it's really exciting right now is that much of the research on spinal cord injury victims being able to regain control and to have neurological function is through research on inflammation and lowering inflammation. So bringing down the inflammation around the injury. Well, lo and behold, eggs and ovaries are the other cells in the human body besides nerves that don't ever reproduce, right? When you lose your eggs, they die. Hence, as you get older, your fertility goes down. And so what's really cool is that now we know with acai, we can probably slow down inflammation in the body. And so I think over the next 18 months, you're going to see a flood of research out there and a flood of articles talking about inflammation being the key to fertility. And I think the thing that will tie the three of us together here is that supplementation to bring down inflammation is key, and having a diet that's anti-inflammatory is key. And I think bringing your inflammation down is how you bring your hormones back into line. And if you're inflamed, you ain't getting pregnant, or you're using a surrogate anyway. So there you go. That's the punchline that ties us all together.